Hello, and welcome to today's lecture on progesterone, the Goldilocks hormone for perimenopause and menopause. I'm your host today, Dr. LaKeisha, integrative gynecologist, hormone specialist, speaker, and best-selling author of The Other PMS, Your Survival Guide for Perimenopause and Menopause. Today's lecture outline, as we see here, we're going to talk about progesterone as an introduction. We're going to talk about a review of progesterone, going back over what we already know, but I would love to build that foundation just a little bit stronger, be able to talk about progesterone as it relates to the menstrual cycle, talking about all the areas that progesterone is synthesized or made. I think you're going to be surprised as to where progesterone is made in the body. We're going to talk about progesterone as a sleep aid, progesterone nature's Xanax. I know you're going to be excited about that. And then we're going to talk about progesterone's role in the conversation around weight gain. Key takeaway points that I would love for you to do to take away today. I want you to be able to have a paradigm shift in your thinking. Instead of just thinking about estrogen dominance, maybe start thinking about progesterone deficiency. Being aware of where progesterone influences are, like in the brain as well as in the uterus. I want you to begin to think of progesterone as nature's Xanax. And once you are aware of where progesterone is synthesized, I also want you to be aware of how it's metabolized. We do a lot of conversations around estrogen metabolism. We need to do the same due diligence when it comes to progesterone. And then I want you to begin to have progesterone be part of the conversation sooner rather than later when it comes to perimenopausal women. Progesterone, that is a beautiful, beautiful molecule. All right, let's talk about this foundational work. Let's go back to the beginning. I love these type of graphs because they help us to remember where we're coming from. So remember in the cycle, I'm going to use a 28-day cycle just because it's easier mathematically to do that. So your 28-day cycle, remember there's a first half or the follicular phase, and there's the second half or the luteal phase. And right in the middle is where we usually have ovulation. So when we think of progesterone, we think about it being part of the luteal phase. So remember, estrogen is mainly predominant in that follicular phase because we are recruiting follicles from the ovaries to try and get that one egg to pop out so that it can get fertilized. Progesterone is rising just a little bit. If you look here on the graph, progesterone is rising. That's the green line there. It is starting to rise a little bit around mid-cycle, but you have estrogen going up a lot higher and sooner than your progesterone. Now, around mid-cycle, progesterone will peak right after that ovulation, and estrogen will start falling, okay? So remember, estrogen is helping the uterine lining to actually proliferate and grow so that it has all the nutrients that are needed there for an egg to come, a fertilized egg to come and implant in the uterine lining. Progesterone is there to support the pregnancy until the placenta can take over, okay? So just have that basic in your head. Now, progesterone should hang around after mid-cycle to say whether or not it's going to drop. If it drops, then you have that shed of the uterine lining, okay? Now, we talk to each other in certain terminology. Practitioners, doctors, all those in healthcare, we use certain terminology because that's what we're taught. Now, this is where I challenge us. I challenge us to start becoming that medical interpreter. Become that person that can take this complex concept and break it down into everyday words. So let me help you here. This is the way that I actually tell my patients to think about it, and it's in the book as well. I say, think of your period as grass growing. Estrogen's in charge of making the grass grow. Progesterone makes sure that the lawn gets cut if needs be. So let's think about this. Estrogen is on the rise in that follicular phase, making the uterine lining grow. Progesterone waits around to see if there was a fertilized egg. If there was no fertilized egg, then progesterone says, okay, guys, in 2 weeks, we're going to mow the lawn. But it has to wait around for that 2-week time frame before it sheds the uterine lining or helps to mow the lawn. The other thing progesterone does is that it makes sure that estrogen doesn't make the grass grow too high, okay? So progesterone also has a regulatory effect. So progesterone will help to downregulate estrogen receptors when it's time, okay? So progesterone should wait around that mid-cycle, get the memo. If no egg was fertilized, it waits about 2 weeks, and then it helps to mow the lawn. Now, here's where things get interesting. If progesterone doesn't wait around those 2 weeks and progesterone starts falling too fast, too soon, that's when you can have those symptoms. And that's why I say, let's start thinking about it as progesterone deficiency, okay? Here's another paradigm shift that I want you to start thinking that I think would be very beneficial, especially when it comes to our perimenopausal and menopausal patients. A lot of us say no uterus, no progesterone. When it comes to bioidentical hormone therapy, no uterus, no progesterone. You're going to find out in this lecture that there are other organs that really do need and benefit from progesterone. So let's toss this old paradigm out the window. Now, here is where I want us to just get a review where progesterone is synthesized. So let's talk about where progesterone comes from. We're going to talk about its metabolism and other organ systems in which it is synthesized. The main one that we know about is the ovary, right? All of us know it's like, oh yes, we know that the corpus luteum, once that egg pops out, progesterone is continued to rise. If the egg was fertilized, the corpus luteum sustains the level of progesterone in the system until the placenta can take over at about week 14 and then sustain that way. Now, what happens is that there is, and we'll talk about what happens and how progesterone actually gets turned into its active hormone. Another site for progesterone production is the adrenals, and we'll get to there. And the last place we're going to talk about the where progesterone is produced is the brain. It's the nervous system through neurons and glial cells. I know this is getting super interesting, right? So here in the ovary, so LH is going to stimulate the thecal cells in the ovary to produce cholesterol. And through a series of reactions, cholesterol is going to be converted into pregnenolone. Everybody loves that, right? We love that big errant molecule, pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is taken to the mitochondria, and through another series of reactions, especially enzymatic activity, a side chain is cleaved by the P450 system, and that then gives you pregnenolone, okay? Now, pregnenolone is then converted to progesterone by the 3-beta hydrosteroid dehydrogenase, all right? And we all know that. That's like one of those things a lot of people rattle off. So progesterone synthesis in the ovary is one of those byproducts of cholesterol metabolism. Cholesterol is important. I want you to remember that, okay? Another place that progesterone is produced is the adrenal glands. There are 2 areas in the adrenal glands, the zona fasciculata and the zona glomerulosa. And in these areas, progesterone is metabolized and broken down into 4 major neuroactive steroids: allopregnenolone, isopregnenolone, pregnenolone, and epipregnenolone. This is very important because these neuroactive steroids can cross the blood-brain barrier, can go into the brain and interact with neurotransmitters so that it can help with other brain activity. And we're going to see how that shows up. One thing in particular I want you to start understanding and note: as we get older, as women get older, they stop making as much progesterone from the adrenals as they used to. Chronic stress can do the same thing. It can stop making this wonderful allopregnenolone. When you have chronic stress, your allopregnenolone levels decrease. So chronic stress can mimic you going into perimenopause, or, in my opinion, I believe it causes you to go into perimenopause earlier or even more intensely. So because we don't have this nice, wonderful cascade of events that happens in the adrenals, which can have effect in the brain, women show up with certain symptoms. I want you to think about this. How many of you have women that come in and say, I just can't deal with my stress anymore. I don't have the ability to handle the stress like I used to, right? Think about this. Oh my goodness, the chronic stress. She's not making as much as those neuroactive steroids that come from the progesterone. Maybe she doesn't have enough progesterone in the first place to be able to produce these metabolites. Progesterone deficiency. Yep, you're gonna love my terminology and the way I think after a while. So think about this. So we have the ovary that stops making enough progesterone. As we get older, we stop recruiting those eggs. We stop making as many. You may not have as much progesterone that's coming from the ovaries. Or it may be that the hormonal milieu has changed, and so hormones don't go as high as they used to. They drop a little sooner. So this can show up how? Women coming in talking about their cycles are different. The characteristic of their cycles are different. They're either coming closer together or further apart, or they're heavier or lighter. So their cycle characteristic has changed. This starting to make sense? This starting to make sense. The next thing, I can't handle the stress like I used to. That's another thing. The next thing I want you to remember and know is progesterone and the brain. So not only do you have these neurosteroids that come over and can cross the blood-brain barrier, you have progesterone receptors in certain places. The hypothalamus, the amygdala, the hippocampus, the thalamus, and the frontal cortex. You also have cells in the nervous system that make a little bit of progesterone. So you have the oligodendrites that can make neurosteroids, and you have the microglia cells that can actually make a little bit of that progesterone and those same neurosteroids that can make the pregnane. So there is a metabolite from progesterone, 4-pregnane and 5-pregnane. These particular ones are located in the neuromilieu. Now, how does this affect how a person's brain health or their neurotransmitters? The pregnane steroid form of progesterone can go and sit on the GABA A and the NMDA receptors and actually cause the GABA receptors to open up and cause an influx of that chloride into the nerve cells and cause a decrease in their activity. So we can have progesterone to be able to influence neurochemistry. Isn't this awesome? Oh my goodness gracious, this is awesome. So as you can see here on this slide here, this is the pregnane steroid sitting on that GABA A receptor or the NMDA receptor, causing there to be an influx opening of that channel, which causes a message to go down into that neuron. And so you can now have progesterone helping to be nature's Xanax, right? So when this pregnane, one of those pregnanes comes and sits on that receptor and causes that influx in the calcium ion to go into the channel or open up the channel, you now have inhibitory causes, and now you have the following results, or you'll see the following properties: sedative properties, hypnotic properties, analgesic properties, anxiolytic properties, anticonvulsant properties have also been seen in studies. Progesterone interacts with these different areas, these different neurotransmitters, and can give you various results. So let's think about this. If progesterone can go in and interact with the serotonergic pathways, as we see here, if it can go in and interact with the cholinergic pathways, the dopaminergic pathways, and the GABAergic pathways, and the glutamatergic pathways, it can have an effect on how someone shows up in terms of feeling anxious, feeling calmer, someone's memory, feeling as if they can have the ability to recall, the ability to feel calmer. I have women that come in and say, they are experiencing anxiety at a level they have never experienced before in their lives. And it is a level of anxiety where they are really feeling a sense of doom, a sense of dread, like they are overly anxious, and it's specific to their health. So this is why this is important to understand that progesterone is not just for the uterus. It has effects in other organ systems. That's why it's a hormone. Remember, a hormone, the definition of a hormone is where it is made in one part of the body, but it can have effects on other organ systems, right? So this is one of those examples. Now, let's talk about this a little bit more. If progesterone has lowered, if progesterone is lower, if we're having a deficiency of progesterone, how can this look? If it interacts with the serotonergic pathway, which we know helps with sleep, ding, 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 ding. I see the light bulbs going off. I see the light bulbs. This is why some of our perimenopausal patients come in and one of their first complaints is, I can't sleep anymore like I used to. Something is going on. I can't either get to sleep or I can't stay asleep. I have this ability for my brain to just open up. So progesterone interacts with serotonin, serotonergic pathways, to begin to start that nice cascade of events that happens so that you can take tryptophan and turn it into 5-HTP, which can turn into serotonin, which can turn into melatonin. You see how this is playing? So some of the women that come to you, and this is why I say start progesterone early in the conversation with your perimenopausal women, because it could be that their deficiency of progesterone is starting to impact their lives. How about those that come in and say, I feel like I have early onset Alzheimer's. What is going on? My memory is being affected. What am I supposed to, what is this? I can't recall things. I'm a CEO of a company. I run this business. I'm taking care of family. I'm the sandwich generation. Is this what it is? Because I'm taking care of so many people, I can't keep it all in my head anymore? Progesterone plays a role in so many different organ systems. So what are some of the benefits of progesterone, like we're just talking about? And we're going to talk about it in tandem with estrogen, because it's a seesaw effect. You have to have the right amount, and that's what we're going to talk about too, because progesterone can upregulate estrogen receptors and it can downregulate estrogen receptors. So when you have progesterone and estrogen in a nice balance, it can help with cervical mucus, making sure that you have vaginal lubrication. It helps with the secretory phase and helps to balance out that proliferative phase of the uterine lining. It helps with our arterial size. So it increases the arterial size of our arteries, which means it helps with vasodilation. It also can help with bone formation. So again, this is why we bring this into the conversation sooner than later when we're talking about that perimenopausal patient, because we know that osteopenia, osteoporosis, is the number 2 cause of morbidity and mortality in women. The number 1 cause, cardiovascular disease. Number 2, osteoporosis. Number 3, breast cancer. Now, having the right amount of progesterone on board can also help with something called the QT interval. So we're getting into that electricity of the heart. We're getting into cardiology. How many of you have that patient that comes in and says, my heart has been racing, I've been feeling flutters, something is going on, I feel a weird beat in my chest, I've gone to the cardiologist, they've hooked me up to that machine, they've sent me home with the machine for a few days, maybe a week or 2, and they can't do anything. Well, we know that progesterone has an influence on the electricity of the heart, and that's what EKGs look at, the electricity of the heart, the electrical current of the heart that causes the heart to have that S1, S2 beat, do, 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 do. When the electricity is off by just a little bit, people feel that. Some people are super sensitive to feeling the different electrical impulses of their heart. I've had patients that have come in that are saying something's going on. Like I said, they put me on the monitor. They don't see anything, but I feel something. You give them a little bit of progesterone. What do you know? Their palpitations go away. You guys are you gotta come over to my camp when you start thinking about having progesterone in the conversation sooner than later, having that paradigm shift of progesterone deficiency and the paradigm shift of, hey, even though she doesn't have a uterus, there are other benefits to progesterone, right? And progesterone can help with that deep restorative sleep. So this is just a win-win situation. Continued benefits of progesterone for this particular slide. We're talking about those brain benefits. Remember, those neuroactive steroids can be very, very helpful with the different neurotransmitter systems. So like we said, in the serotonergic pathway, it can be helpful with improving memory, recovery of memory, okay? This is what can happen when the neurosteroids go into the brain. And remember, these are metabolites of progesterone. Remember, there are progesterone receptors in the brain. So the brain wants progesterone. The brain can even make a little bit of progesterone so that we can feel like ourselves again. And remember, for the adrenals, we stop making as much progesterone from the adrenals as we used to. And that can affect our sympathetic and parasympathetic balance. Our sympathetic nervous system can get upregulated and we can feel as if we're on high alert all the time. And so giving that progesterone, remember that progesterone can give you that calming effect, that sedative effect, anti-anxiolytic effect. And so these are the things that can be very, very helpful when we have the right amount of progesterone for it. So what are some of the symptoms? Let's pull this all together. We've been talking about it a little bit here, a little bit there. Some of the symptoms of progesterone deficiency can be hot flashes, because we know progesterone can help with that regulatory center, okay, cholinergic regulatory center of temperature. It can give you, people can wake up with, I tend to hear more of night warmth, because your perimenopausal patients will be quick to say to you, I don't get night sweats. I'm not sweating. I'm just warm. I had to wake up and actually take the covers off or kick that foot out, right? Okay. And it can, symptoms of progesterone deficiency can be memory lapses, foggy thinking, depression, anxiety, mood not feeling as regulated as it usually is for most people, sleep disturbances, heart palpitation, water retention. And this is that two-edged sword. This is why we have to have it just right. This is why I call progesterone the Goldilocks hormone. Premenstrual syndrome, early miscarriages, cyclical headaches. Cyclical headaches can be one of those things that I see a lot of too in that perimenopausal state where progesterone starts dropping and it becomes a little more erratic. And so I have patients that complain more of headaches that they never experienced before, but they'll notice, oh, it's either right before my cycle or it's right it's right before I actually start having my period. Okay. Other thing that I see a lot of or hear a lot of is that painful or lumpy breast. So remember, progesterone has a regulatory component to it. So it can downregulate estrogen receptors, which means that it can actually kind of regulate how much estrogen stimulate tissue. And if you have that extra estrogen hanging, or if you have an imbalance of estrogen to progesterone, then you'll have more of that estrogen stimulating breast tissue, which can make it more painful, make it feel lumpier because it's actually having a little bit of growth type of stimulation there of the tissue. And so progesterone being on board can be very, very helpful for that. Now, what happens when you have too much progesterone? You get some of the same symptoms, actually. You can get weight gain. And this is where I want to bring progesterone into the conversation about weight gain. And it's because of the metabolism of progesterone. If you have too much progesterone on board, your body will start making a different type of metabolite of that progesterone. Your body will start making more of the mineralocorticoid, okay? Which cause the kidneys to hold on to more water. which cause you to have water retention, to have that weight gain. When you have mineralocorticoids, you're more likely to present like a diabetic insulin resistant person, and you start having metabolic issues and metabolic dysfunction, okay? So this is why I want you to be familiar with that and know you may have to adjust your hormone protocols or the plans for your patient, okay? So think about it this way. And I love metaphors and I love being able to make it seem, real to you. There was a show that I used to watch when I was younger, so it's going to tell my age a little bit here, but that's okay. The I Love Lucy show. And she and her friend Ethel, her girlfriend Ethel, they would get into the most weirdest situation. At one time, they were in a candy factory and they were boxing up the chocolate. And the conveyor belt was coming along in front of them and they were picking up the chocolates at a nice speed and they were getting them all packaged. And then the speed of the conveyor belt went up. And they had too much chocolate coming down on the belt. And they didn't know what to do. So they started stuffing chocolates in their bras. They started eating chocolate, putting it in their mouth. And that's essentially what's happening to your body when you have too much progesterone. It's like, okay, where do we put this? Where do we do this? We can't make more 4 and 5 pregnant. We can't make more of the neurosteroids. Oh, let's just make some more mineralocorticoids. Let's just make some more of those. And that'll take care of it. And what happens is your body goes, oh, more of this? Oh, we can't get rid of this fast. And so it starts holding on to all that water and it starts making you retain more weight. You can feel crampy. You can feel fatigue. You can have mood swings because you're not making the right form of progesterone when you have too much progesterone on board. So this is why I call progesterone the Goldilocks hormone for perimenopausal and menopausal women. You're going to find in your practice that you're going to start treating patients very customized. You're going to have a customized approach to them. You're going to learn that you can't just say, here's the protocol, you put everybody on this dose and just leave them. You're going to find that perimenopausal women may need a certain dose at a certain time, and then you may need to increase it during another time and then drop it back down. Your menopausal women, you're going to find that maybe they don't need as high a dose as some do. Some may need a lower dose. Some really do need, I have patients that need a big dose of progesterone so that they can actually get to sleep. Everybody is different, and you're going to start customizing your care. So this is that slide I wanted to show you about progesterone metabolism, where you will start making certain types of progesterone if you have too much of it on board, and then your body's trying to farm it out and trying to figure out where it needs to go. So our takeaways from today's lesson, paradigm shift in thinking. I want to add into this paradigm shift in thinking, let's take away the old adage, no uterus, no progesterone. Let's start thinking in terms of progesterone deficiency versus just estrogen dominant. It's the same thing, but just a different side of the coin. And when you start thinking progesterone deficiency, you can start saying, oh, I need to give back some of this progesterone. I want you to remember to be aware of how progesterone influences the brain as well as the uterus. Begin to think of progesterone as nature's Xanax to help those shoulders relax, for your patients to take that nice deep breath and be able to relax. And I want you to be aware of how progesterone is synthesized and its metabolism, because when we keep that in the forefront, we're able to make adjustments to our patients' recommendations with ease. And I want you to bring progesterone into the conversation sooner rather than later when it comes to your perimenopausal patient, because this is going to be key in helping them to get back to their 100%. Now, you have to come back for part 2 of this lecture where we talk about progesterone. Not all progesterone is created equal.